Hello and welcome to another bout of unboxing. Today I'm joined in the ring by Henry Jackson. Henry is an extreme sports MC, presenter and comedian who has hosted the Winter Olympics, Red Bull Soapbox, Street League Skateboarding and many of the drop and roll BMX tours. He has also created a video series which he is arguably best known for called Jackson's Hole, which was for Red Bull. Very much looking forward to diving into Henry's story and how on earth he's got to do what he does now. But yeah, without any further ado, Henry, welcome to the unboxing ring.
Great to be here. I wasn't quite ready for a fight. I didn't know we were going quite far that.
Well, yeah.
I have to correct the drop and roll guys who get angry. Well, they wouldn't get angry. They'd probably laugh. So it's actual trials riding that those guys do, not BMX riding.
I did think when I said that,
they'll probably
I was
say that BMXing is probably a bit too cool for them because, in their own words, they are kind of trials geeks. So,
okay, I did think as soon as that came out of my mouth, I was like, that is probably horribly wrong. And I always get, because I work in golf, as you know, I always get it the other way around. It's like people thinking that obvious things with golf, and it just sounds so bad. And I'm like, how on earth they even said that? So yeah, apologies straight away. I've lost my cool and all credibility. But yeah, thanks very much for clearing that up. But yeah, I suppose it's worth us just framing like how on earth, we have this connection. Like I get all kinds of people in the ring and doing various different things, but I try and pick out, people that I've just randomly met along the way of my kind of entrepreneurial journey. So this randomly came up. So with One Putt Golf, which is a company I started up, golf events, trying to sort of reinvent how golf is played, how golf is seen. We did an event in Durham, at Durham Uni, and we worked with a chap who knows Henry, chap called James Cummings, bit of a shout out there. He's an event manager, really good at what he does, helped us in a lot of ways with the event that we did. And I remember we were having, he does like to talk on the phone, that man. And he, whilst we were just talking about events and all kinds of things, he dropped in Henry's name. And if we ever needed an MC for one of our big events, Henry was the man. And I did a bit of research and, saw that Henry does MCing and hosts these awesome sort of massive atmosphere events, Winter Olympics, snowboarding. And the thing about snowboarding and these ski big air events is they're literally the definition of like a big, cool event. And for me, running golf events that we want to make cool, that was like a real aim for us. It's like, how can we be more like that? Why is golf, 3 men and his dog and, like an old man doing the presentation? Like, why is it that way? So yeah, I saw something in Henry and wanted to just, get that energy and use it in one of our events in future. And it hasn't happened yet, may never happen, but we've had loads of chats. We've sent loads of pitch decks to each other. So that's pretty much how we know each other. But yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Henry.
I think it's probably, as you mentioned, I'm from the winter sports, and I remember you pitching One Putt to me as golf meets après ski, and I'm sure you were just honing in on the many hours I've wasted of my life in an après ski bar. That's probably what it was.
Yeah, that's literally it. It's like, how can we just make it slightly more like those ridiculous ski holidays that we go on? But yeah, it's really interesting.
I can't believe we haven't managed to pull it off. Like, it's been a good few years we've been talking about it, and every time we're like, yeah, it's going to happen now, and then something just goes, global pandemic, other events, all kinds of nonsense. Yeah,
just throws whatever at you. But one day it will happen. And I want to get on to that whole topic of, cultures around sports, like with golf and snowboarding. So we'll get onto that later. But Henry, why don't you start off by I'm really interested in your journey to what you do. So love to hear a little bit more about exactly what you do and like how you got there, because I think some people look at someone like you, maybe, putting up all your surfing and snowboarding pictures now and think, oh, he probably just was always like that, and so I always find it interesting to hear how you started out as maybe a more normal, in inverted commas, guy, and then how you kind of found your way into that and how it happened.
Oof, right. Well, yeah, we go back quite a lot. I mean, the snowboarding thing came about That was at school when I was about 15, 96. So I would have been 15.
Yeah.
And yeah, I genuinely think there was a point where I was like, because I was at quite a sort of an old school public school, so there was quite tough environments. I mean, to boarding school and everything, so you had to sort of navigate your way through how you're going to fit into this social nightmare. And I remember thinking at one point, I remember seeing a snowboard magazine and thinking, if I started snowboarding, maybe that would make me a bit cooler, and then maybe I wouldn't get beaten up quite as much. So I think it was, I mean, I did ski a little bit. I did 2 ski holidays when I was young for like a week or something here or there. And I enjoyed that, but it wasn't like that. And then I tried snowboarding and was like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. And around the same time I was skateboarding as well. So the kind of board sports got me, as I think a lot of people who try them do. And back then snowboarding was way less what it is now, of sort of an athletic sport. It was more of it was still functioning as a subculture at that point. So it was kind of like a lot to delve into, a bit of rebellion, all that kind of stuff. And then went out on various holidays, did the classic, like school finished, wanted to do a season, went and did a season, did another one, was meant to go back to uni, decided I could manage to blag my way because I was going to a Scottish uni and they said I could take another gap year. So I was like, oh, probably just take another gap year then. And then after the second year in the mountains, sort of back to back, because I did summer and winter because we had a glacier in the valley, and I was like, there's no way I'm going back to university. Or even going to start, so I should say, because I was going home to work in the UK occasionally, meeting up with friends at university, and they were, I don't know, a lot of them were doing good stuff, but a lot of them were just wasting their time getting pissed. And not that I wasn't doing that, but I felt like I was at least snowboarding on the side. So I don't know, it felt a bit more worthwhile. So moved to the mountains, moved to Austria, ended up finding a really cool crew there, ended up basically staying there. And yeah, through that, I was fortunate enough to work on these snowboard camps in the summer, which taught me how to build snowboard jumps and work in the scene. And through that connection, I met loads of people who build events and things like that. So I ended up for a few years building the snow ramps and constructing the events on a sort of part-time basis. And then ended up working full-time in a snowboard park in Meyerhofen in Austria. So that was kind of shaping the jumps, maintaining the fun park, doing all that.
Can I just jump in and ask, so at this point, how good were you at snowboarding? Were you looking at that as potentially like a professional career in itself, or was that not?
I was probably, I got my little toe into the pool of professional snowboarding, but as far as talent goes, I was the bottom rung of a massive ladder that goes up to heaven, let's say. I mean, I'm still lucky to be sponsored by and sponsored. I'm more like some kind of old guy they can't get rid of, but I'm still supported by a few companies who probably as soon as I started emceeing was a bit more valuable to them than when I was a crap snowboarder. But I did have some sponsors who are awesome, and they helped me a lot through the years. So there was in the back of my mind was this is quite good to legitimize what I was doing. I mean, the first sponsor I got, I remember calling my mum. It was the year after I quit the idea of university. And I remember Protest, who's still out there. I don't get anything from them anymore, but they hooked me up. And I remember calling my mum going, Mum, I'm sponsored. Like, they're going to give me like 200 quid towards my season pass and like 4 jackets. And she was like, you've made it. And I was like, yeah. So that was pretty cool. And through that, I met a few different people within the scene. And we I think the UK snowboard scene is very much about blagging your way through it. So there was a lot of people who were kind of sponsored, and we used to make some pretty cool things happen. Sort of, I don't know, all expenses paid trips to South America and things like this. That, I don't know, I think it's just the British snowboarder mindset, because we don't get it easy. We don't walk out our back door onto a mountain and learn how to ski or snowboard when we're young. We have to leave home, move to a foreign country, or ride plastic. And so you have to be quite tenacious and quite sort of able to navigate that. So I was doing that, had the sponsors, that was great. And then, building these events, and then got into emceeing kind of by accident. There was a few. I've been thinking about this since we first linked up and talked about this podcast. There's still some contention as to who exactly hired me first, I remember there was one contest I built the contest, judged at the contest, and emceed at the contest. And that was a Nikita Chiquita thing. So it was a girls' contest sponsored by the Icelandic company Nikita. And I basically came and did everything. And I don't think I was meant to MC, but someone didn't show up. So that was one of the first ones. And then the real break I got was the snowboard park I worked in. So this was in Meyerhofen, and I was my daily job was going up 7 a.m., 6:30, 7 a.m. on the first gondola, making sure the fun park was built and maintained, and then, snowboard a bit, and then groom all the jumps at the end of the day. And we'd had a particularly long run of snowfall, and my boss called me up. I'd done, I think, 4 weeks straight without a day off, or 3 weeks straight, mainly because the other person who was meant to be responsible was pretty useless, and he was like, I can't trust them, so I need you to be there every day. And I'd hit the end, and I was like, right, I'm not coming to work tomorrow, Stefan. And he's like, yeah, you got the next week off. And then sure enough, it's a Friday night, and I get a call saying, Henry, I'm in dire straits. I need you to be in the fun park tomorrow. And I'm already at après-ski, already pretty pissed. And I'm like, look, there's no way I'm going to work tomorrow. I'm hammered. Like I've worked like so much straight. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, look, there's a junior contest tomorrow. It's going to be kids younger than 15 riding in the park. I can't trust the other person to you can be as drunk as you want. Like, I still remember him saying, like, you can be as drunk as you want because I trust you, but get to the fun park, make sure the jumps are open and they're safe, and then you can just pass out. I just need you there for that, like, beginning moment. And I was like, oh well, all right, I'll do it because it's for the kids. So I remember specifically being dragged out of the nightclub about 6:30 in the morning, the Schlüsselalarm, the now defunct and doesn't exist anymore, Schlüsselalarm in Meyerhofen, by these two Swedish friends. And they're like, you need to be at the fun park. They took me home, put me in my snowboard gear, my work gear, took me up the mountain. I was like, oh, here we go. Went to the fun park, checked everything was okay, didn't do much work, just patted down a bit of snow, and then went to the little hut we had and passed out. And I thought that was my day was done. And then there's a knock about 2 hours later, and it's one of my good friends who runs the snowboard shop in town who's sponsoring the event. And he's like poking me with this stick, like, wake up. And I'm like, what do you want? I'm sleeping, leave me alone. He's like, we need you to MC. And I was like, what do you mean MC? Like, I'm not in a hip hop group. And they're like, no, we need you to, like, be on the microphone. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to be on the microphone. And they were like, no, like, the guy hasn't shown up. Like, we're screwed. No one can speak English, but we're all Austrian. We're scared to speak English. Like, we need it in English. You've got to do it. And I was like, what? And they were like, you can have as much free beer or schnapps as you want. And I was like, I'm in. So I got handed this microphone and then emceed the day. And I think my background as a British snowboard geek sort of put me in good stead. So I knew a lot of the local kids, and I did this emceeing job, and got rather drunk through the day as I was doing it to keep my energy levels up. And at the end of the day, I was like, well, that was pretty fun. And then a couple of people were like, hey, that wasn't too bad. I mean, you're obviously drunk, but it was fun. And like, you weren't being offensive or anything, which a lot of people do when they're drunk. And that was actually quite good. And I was like, oh, didn't think much of it. And then luckily there was a couple of guys there who ran a really big snowboard event later in the season. And I don't know, I guess it planted a seed of sort of, oh, maybe he could do our event. And from that, a couple of people, I don't know, were there who happened to run different things, and they sort of filed me into maybe he could do it sort of thing. And then for the next year, I got calls like, hey, we've got an event this weekend. There's no money, but you want to come for the weekend and have, free drinks, and you can bring your friends, and it would be cool to make something cool happen. So I did a bunch of events like that, and I don't know, the ball just started rolling from there, really. Yeah. That was quite long-winded.
That was epic. Yeah, absolutely love that.
But yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. And then actually, our friend John Weaver, who I've talked to you about, the Anti-Blueprint Project, coincidentally, we were living together at that time, and he was working for a snowboard company that sponsored a bunch of events, a junior series, and he was going around to these events, and a similar thing happened to him in that he would get to an event and the MC was rubbish, and he would be like, look, I'm not paying for you, you're crap, give me the microphone. And he started doing it, and he'd done a few British events, and he did a couple, and then I did a couple, and then we were like, hey, there's maybe something in this. Like, we've obviously got the knowledge, we've got the banter, and maybe we could do it together. And we actually ended up forming our company, which now I run, but John was in the, you know, the inception of it. It was called Banter Box.
Yeah.
And we actually sort of did a double-headed thing for a long time. We would cover each other if there was an event that he was going to do and then he couldn't do it, I'd do it. And whenever we could, we sort of sell ourselves as the dynamic duo of emceeing. And yeah, it went really well. And then he moved off to probably much bigger and better things, working for Nike and things like that. And I sort of stayed here on the events. But
different
yeah,
routes. Different routes.
That started, really.
Yeah, love it. Really, really cool story. And there's so much that I want to dive back into there and just kind of go into a little bit more depth, if I may. But just wanted to start off with like right from the start and the whole. I guess I think it's a good time to go into it now. Is this? So you say that you were attracted to snowboarding right at the start from this kind of you felt it had this cool culture and like rebellious culture about it, and I find that really interesting in the culture that are around sports. And it's very obvious even right now that as soon as you mention snowboarding, skiing, especially big air and tricks, there's a very cool feel to them. So do you think that's something that is innate about the sport? Do you think it's just, it's just cool that you're up there doing big air tricks? Or do you think that that's a culture that's been created almost, on purpose around these sports? What are your thoughts on that?
I think snowboarding. How long have we got? How far do we go?
We could probably spend a whole podcast on this, but
that's probably a whole nother podcast. It is. But to be honest, if I try and break it down relatively quickly, so snowboarding came about. Obviously, skiing existed, and then surfing, skateboarding was around, and there was sort of two points in the States, in America, where snowboarding sort of blossomed. I was on the West Coast with Tom Sims, and he was an ex-professional. He was still a professional vert skateboarder, and he was a pro surfer. And so he came in this California vibe and saw snowboarding and went, I'm going to take this up to Lake Tahoe because there's lots of snow there. And then on the East Coast, you had Jake Burton, who obviously founded Burton Snowboards and passed away recently. Rest in peace, Jake. But, he's sort of the founder of the industry of snowboarding. And on the East Coast, you had sort of smaller icy hills, and Jake came about creating his own boards and hiking up hills. And it was a bit more sort of race concept. Like, they still jumped and things, but these two cultures came together eventually. And I think that the inherent coolness in snowboarding, if there is such a thing, it comes from the sort of, in the beginning, snowboarders were rejected. There's a wonderful video on YouTube of, there's a guy, mullet, glasses, being interviewed about snowboarders, and he's obviously a diehard skier, because he's like, well, these snowboarders, they're riotous and they cause lots of trouble. Some of them have had a little bit to drink and they just shouldn't be on our hills, kind of thing. And so back in the day, we weren't allowed, it was before my time, but snowboarders weren't allowed on ski resorts. So it was kind of this sort of rebellion that kids were throwing their skis in the bin, like, screw this, I'm going snowboarding. And we had to have, you dig your own half pipe. And so crews would come together to build their own jumps or build a half pipe or set up a race course or whatever it was. And Jake himself, it took a long time before ski resorts would allow anyone on the mountain. It was inherent, and because it was born from skateboarding, and skateboarding at that time was still very counterculture and things like that. In the beginning of snowboarding, I think there was this kind of element to it, and it was people could come in and express themselves however they wanted, and there were no rules, etc. And while it's changed a lot from that these days, I think there's a lot less of that kind of real hardcore counterculture vibe in it. It's a lot more a pastime that people get involved in and still love, and there is still this kind of cool element to it. But I think that's where it comes from the sort of roots of snowboarding and everything inherited from skateboarding and surfing and things like that.
Yeah, I would say it's really interesting, and I totally agree. As someone that's fancies myself as a little bit of a rebel and went on a few ski holidays. And I remember, there was one guy in our group in the skiing that would snowboard, and he was, the cooler rebel kind of guy. And then I gave it a go one year, And I just loved the fact that it was a bit different, and I'd get a few comments being like, oh, who's this guy on a tray? And like, for me, that was brilliant. I love that. Just being
Yeah,
something a little bit different, a little bit unique. Like now I can wear a slightly baggier top or whatever it may be. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting that just randomly things can come out like that and carry that culture on today. Because working in golf, I'm obviously really interested in that, because you look at, I guess you could compare potentially skiing to traditional golf. And, you know, if you look at skiing, obviously there is the much cooler sides to it, but it's that more traditional, you know, prim and proper approach and the traditional way of doing things. And the same with golf. It has such a long history. But what I've always seen in golf is that there needs to be this like counterculture or subculture that's a bit rebellious, and actually form a movement around that. And that's very much what we, you know, we're trying to get going with One Putt. And, you know, sometimes these things can get going in various ways. Like it could get going through a company, it could get going through just someone who's really cool and just starts a movement themselves. But yeah, I think it's cool that kind of culture grabbed you. And then, so moving on from that, which moves quite nicely into the next bit I wanted to pick up on question was, so I want to speak in a little bit more detail about this school you were at. And obviously you had this uni place, which I'm sure was leading you down a path which would have been very different. But it's easy to just, you know, brush over that and go, oh, you know, it was never for me. But I'm sure at the time there was probably quite a lot of pressure from, you know, peers from school, parents, all those kind of things to actually go off and do your ski season, snowboard season for 1 year, but then come back and get in the real world. So how did that play out for you?
Oh, 100%. Like I struggled with that. I struggled with that decision like for a long, long time. So yeah, I went to a boarding school. I was very lucky. I mean, whether or not I enjoyed it that much, like I was in a privileged position to be able to go to this quote unquote better school. I mean,
Sure.
these days I'm not 100% sure, but you know, I didn't, you know, I didn't mind it. It was all right. It was a lot of time to be wasted and fun to be had. And probably didn't reflect, as the teachers used to say, the potential was not quite reflected in my results after GCSEs. Because yeah, I think, well, I did my GCSEs, did quite well in them, and then that's when I started skateboarding, snowboarding quite a lot. And there was a couple of moments, like the first moment that planted the seed that I was actually going to sack it all off, but I did actually ignore it quite heavily through the sort of peer pressure and school pressure and parental pressure, which wasn't great, to be honest. My parents were rad. But I remember going to the career advice. Remember you had this career advice thing at school where you did like a questionnaire and it told you whether you were going to be like, I don't know, a plumber or Adolf Hitler or a lawyer or whatever it was. So I did that, didn't really pay attention. And the results did come out actually a bit of a Freudian slip. It came out as a lawyer, you're not quite Hitler. Not quite. But it said, oh, you're probably tuned to being a lawyer or something else.
Right.
And I was like, oh, great, cool. That's good. And then you go in and meet a careers advice officer who's paid there to, poor guy, probably, you know, has to deal with all our idiots just coming up with all kinds of shit. But I remember going in and saying, look, you know, he's like, oh, here are your results. You know, you're obviously blah, 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 blah. And you predicted A-level results of this. And I was like, what did you do? Have you got any questions? And I was like, well, I don't really care about that right now. What I care about most is skateboarding and snowboarding. And do you have any advice for like getting like how I could turn that into a career? And the guy just looked at me and went, so your results of this, that's just stupid. That's just playing or something, you know, some innocuous comment. And I was like, fuck you, man. Like, I'll show you. And I think that's when the seed was really planted. I was like, you know what? I am going to make this my career. But it wasn't like, you know, I'm not like that driven in that way. But I suspect that's where a seed was planted. But then I went through school, did the A-levels, which was, you know, according to my teachers, I messed them up. I don't really care. And then I knew that I was going for the snowboard season. So I quit school, finished my A-levels, went straight to work in a snowboard shop in Edinburgh, which was near to where the school I went, saved up money for the season, and then went away on my first season. And was always like, yeah, I'll definitely be coming back for uni. Like I had a place at Aberdeen University to study literature and film studies because I was actually really into films and that stuff.
Okay.
English literature and things. So there was like, it wasn't just like, oh, I'll sign up for geography or something like that. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I was hoping it would be something really, yeah.
You know, it wasn't like that. I sort of said to myself, if I am going to go, I should do something I'm interested in, which I really was. So in the back of my head, I was always like, I'm going to go back. And then, yeah, one snowboard season turned into a summer camp, which is this one on the glacier that I ended up going to. And then it was like, oh, I should probably stay in Austria because it's pretty cool here. And I remember specifically, so my parents have been great. They've always been very supportive. They put up with all kinds of crap, bless them. And I remember, like, they were like, I think I left it like really late. Like, we're talking like a couple of weeks before I was meant to be going to Aberdeen University, like, yeah, packing up the car kind of time. And I was working in the UK in a lampshade factory or something to save money. And my parents thought it was saving money for, you know, uni or whatever, but it was, I was like, I'm saving money to go back to Austria. And yeah, it was really close to the deadline. And I remember going into their room and I was like, walking up to the door, psyching myself up, like, like, oh, I can't tell him, fuck, how am I going to do this? And then eventually just went, right, got something to tell you. University's not for me. I really think it will be a waste of my time. And I had a plan. I was like, look, financially, I'm going to be in this much debt. Like, I can see that it's not for me. And my mom, I could see, was kind of like, what's he going to do? And my dad was like, all right, well, what's your plan? And I was like, well, I've been working in these snowball parks. I've got a job offer here. I'm doing the lampshade thing now. I'm going to do that. And he's like, well, as long as you've got a plan, like, go for it. Like, he's like, university was a waste of time for me as well. He joined the army and he basically kind of wasted his time at university because he was on an army wage. He just bought dinner for everyone and messed about. Yep. And I think my mum maybe was a little bit more shocked because she wasn't quite sure exactly what I was up to. But then, yeah, like, as I said earlier, like, as soon as I got my first sponsorship in, she was kind of like, ooh. And I remember friends of ours, like good friends from school, like they lived in the same area as us. And like, I remember specifically one friend's mum being like, oh, you're not worried about Henry, you know, like, oh, he's throwing his life away kind of deal. And I think eventually my mom got pissed off and was like, nah, fuck off, he's good. He just got a sponsored contract for free clothes, so he's all good. But I remember it being like quite a thing. Like, it wasn't just a case of like, I'm just going to sack this all off. But I think that was quite inherent in the public school system as well. It was. I mean, from my year at school, of the people I still keep in touch with, there's still quite a few friends I'm in touch with, but there weren't, I could say there's probably a count on one hand the amount of people who didn't go to university. Like, everybody did.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. Because I'm whenever I have someone on in the ring like this, I'm trying to find that similar thing that I can relate to. And I think anyone who does go their own path with it, whatever it may be, it might be starting a business in London, which is kind of not as out the box as something that may appear to be, like with what you did a bit earlier on, but it's still that same process that you have to go through at some point in your life, where you make the conscious decision to go, you know what, like, no, I'm going to bang on that door and I'm going to consciously choose not to go down that path. And I think that's a very universal thing that happens in basically anyone's life, especially if you go to a good school, quote unquote, because I think there's more pressure to push you down a financially safe route, which I don't think takes into account anything to do in the realm of fulfillment, purpose, and enjoying your life.
Yeah, I think I'd agree quite strongly with that. I mean, you know, in no way was there ever any struggle. You know, I was brought up in a very privileged environment. You know, there was no, like, you know, hand to mouth type situation, which sometimes breeds, I guess, other people who've made it from that situation, from a less privileged point of view, they've made it. Yeah. They've had to fight for everything the whole way, and it's like, well, they've always, whereas with me, the sort of river was flowing down that path, and it was very easy just to float towards. Well, it's obvious you go to university, and then your mates will get you a job, or you get a job, and off you go. But it definitely it wasn't for me. Let's say.
Yeah, and peers, I just wanted to chat a little bit more about that. So I hope you had a few friends at school anyway, but I imagine, you had a few mates at school who were, as you said, going off and doing uni. They saw you going off and doing these ski seasons, and it was obviously a very consciously different route. So how did that play out with them? They saw you doing this thing. Was there any kind of animosity or them thinking, what's he doing here?
No, there was a lot of good friends my parents lived near Newcastle, and Newcastle Uni is obviously quite popular. So there was a lot of friends from school, or through friends from school who ended up in Newcastle. I met another wider circle of friends, and another good friend of mine in school. He went to university eventually, but he actually went the similar route to me. He was doing sort of African wildlife seasons, as it were. He'd go and work on game reserves, and he was very focused on that for a while until he ended up coming back and doing ecological studies. But him and I, we would be at home similar times, and we would go and hang out with our mates in that uni group. And so we would be the kind of two guys who were just, doing different stuff. And everyone was pretty cool with it. A couple of the friends came out to visit. But there was one thing, occasionally there was a couple of people who'd always, I'd come back and be like, oh, what are you guys up to? And, they'd be like, oh, pissing down with rain in Newcastle in November or whatever. And yeah, just studying for whatever it was. And, oh, this sucks. And what are you up to, Henry? I'm like, oh, I'm on my way to the ferry. I'm taking the boat to Amsterdam, might stop there for a couple of days, and then I'm off to Austria for the season. And they were like, oh, that's amazing. In fact, one of them jumped in the car one time with a toothbrush and his dad's credit card in his back pocket, and almost didn't come back. But there was a couple of people that you get the old, that's another podcast story as well. But there was a couple of people you get I always found I get the phrase, well, you're so lucky to do what you do, which I didn't think too much of it at the time. I was kind of like, yeah, I guess I am lucky. But then sometimes it would come out. Sometimes it was just a nice comment, I think. But sometimes it come out a little bit more pointed, as if like, I don't know what they meant, but it was kind of like, I was like, it used to piss me off a little, to a certain extent, like the idea of you're so lucky to do what you do. And well, I would say I'm very lucky to have been born in a first world country, in a privileged family. I haven't had too many struggles in my life, which I'd say that's the luck that I've had to have been able to explore these opportunities. But like that comment from these guys, like, yeah, you're lucky to do what you do, and I was kind of like, well, you could do it, like, you've just got to do it. Like, it's not like someone's said, oh, here's the keys to an apartment in Austria, enjoy, here's a free season pass, here's a free snowboard, here's a free like, I had to make all that happen. And, there were times like, yeah, I was on my knees scrubbing toilets, or like 16-hour shifts making lampshades in a factory in Blythe, or like, shitty jobs to make it happen. And that phrase used to, after a few years, it pissed me off. I was like, just fuck off. It's not luck. Like, I'm doing this. And like, it's a strange one.
It's almost, I feel, loading a bit of guilt on you to try and sort of bring you back down and then level the playing field between those two people. Because that, whoever that person is that might say it may have, seen you two on a level playing field, say at school, and then they look at you and they can probably sense that you're enjoying your life a bit more than they are. And it seems a bit more fun and a bit more exciting. And they can sort of either choose to be like, oh, that's really cool, and how did you do that? Maybe like try and learn a few tips and how you got to that place. Or they can kind of go, no, you're lucky and I'm less lucky, so that's the only reason that you're doing something that you enjoy and I don't. And by saying that, it kind of keeps them where they are in the box. And it's kind of it's like that lucky pedestal that you put people on. And I think it's really interesting with like Instagram or any famous person or anyone killing it out there that you look at, especially if you don't know them personally. You'll just look at them and go, yeah, but they're lucky. They're not like,
yeah, sure.
They haven't worked like super hard for it. And of course there is luck along the way, which I want to get onto. And there's taking opportunities, and there's your natural gifts that you go along with. But that's why I really like doing this podcast and speaking to people and hearing the whole story and the whole path and comparing it to pretty average lives that everyone has, and everyone experiences. And as you say, it is the case of like anyone can do it. It's just, it sort of comes down to how confident can you be that you know the other path isn't right for you, and how confident in yourself can you be that another path will be right for you. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. But yeah, it's a you could probably think about that and make about another 10 podcasts just on that topic.
Yeah, I know, and it's been interesting as well with me, because I'm a Gemini, which I'm not sure how astrologically savvy you are. I don't really follow
Always
it much.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't follow astrology much, but from what I understand about the Gemini split personalities, I see quite a lot of that in myself, because there's, in some ways, I'm not very driven. Like I've friends who have a similar situation. They've been presented with an opportunity for something, and they're like, bang, I'm gonna like bust myself to make this career, let's say, work.
Yeah.
And while my career, I've worked hard at it, and that's brilliant. I'm sort of, I find things have worked better for me when I've kind of let them flow in that way. I'm trying not too hippie here. It's like,
no, I like it.
So many jobs. There's been freelance life. I'm sure can be quite stressful at sometimes, especially when you're planning a year and you've had a great year. Is always good, but then especially now, I'm a freelance event worker and there's no events in the world, so I'm kind of screwed. You can start to stress out about things like that. And I found in my career that when I have stressed and worried about it, it's just not gone well at all. And when I've just kind of been able to sit back and go, do you know what? Not that I'm just going to sit on my arse and, pick my fingernails. Like I'm going to actively chase things. But if I try to have the mindset of like, this is the be all and end all, I'm going to be in trouble. But if I'm like, right, let's just let it flow and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And when I'm able to sort of have that adaptation, I think like, okay, well, this isn't working out. We can try something else. And that's always worked well for me.
Yeah. It sounds to me like there's a couple of things that come up there. One is what I kind of heard or read between the lines is that you're not as externally motivated. So if there's sort of like that, carrot of 100K a year on the career path, you sort of think, I'm not that interested in that. Like, why? Why? Whereas there's an internal motivation to create the goals that you want to create and that you find meaningful. Is that? I think
I was chatting with someone the other day about this. I'd rather surf the biggest wave of my life than earn 10K or 20K. Like, if someone could say to me like, or I'd rather go and like climb a mountain and spend the night there and see the sunrise, and again, without wanting to get too hippie, like I think I'm more into experiences like that.
Yeah.
And I'm, it's not that I ignore the other side completely and just, I'm not like going to go and sit in a cave and eat my own pubes to sustain myself and chant at the universe just yet. But yeah, I think I'm more more driven by life experience than maybe like the bank or things.
Yeah.
Maybe I should be a bit more bank balance orientated. I've had some friends visiting recently who are like, oh, you're an American friend of mine. He's a great guy, really good friend. But he's like, oh, you're an idiot if you didn't double your money on the stock market in the last couple of months. And I'm like, guess I'm an idiot then. Probably should have looked into that. But
yeah, no, there is definitely a balance. And I think it's a really difficult one to strike. Especially you go super deep, but with the whole like the capitalist society and all the way the system's structured with school and uni that we've talked about, but actually finding the balance between the two is quite hard. And a massive theme of this podcast is trying to find that balance between doing what you actually just want to do, like you choose to do, wake up, what would I choose to do, and then making a financial career out of it. And surely that's, I think that's a very possible task for anyone. But the other thing,
I agree completely with that, like having some kind of passion like that, because on the other side of my pastimes, like I love emceeing an event and making sure, like I love snowboarding has been like the biggest thing for me since I was a kid and like or 15, and like such a geek about it. Like I see how I believe, maybe it's quite egocentric, how I believe snowboarding should be representative. I want people to have time at the event, and I love it. I absolutely, like, I get such energy at an event, and like walking away from an event. Like, I mean, you know, not that I can ever compare myself to like a famous rock star or anything, but like that kind of high of like leaving, like, you know, that you just made someone epic time, whether it's like Danny MacAskill shows, getting them to scream and shout. And obviously when I'm the MC for events like this, I am the bystander, as it were. I'm not the star of the event, but to be able to relay what's going on to people and make them, like, that kind of connection is epic. Like I love it.
No, it's sick. And just even hearing you talk about that, and to think that it's so obvious that that's what you should be doing, and that's where you're adding most value in the world, and what you should make the most money from in the world. But conventional wisdom says, if you want to make as much money as you can, don't think about that. Go the normal route and be a lawyer, and like break down the barriers and do it. So like, yeah. And that just feels wrong to me. Is like, if you know, you're following your passion, you happen to love law, and that's your thing, and you can make great money, that's awesome. But yeah, it's just, there's more people than are actually like that being, you know, forced that way. So it's weird. And the other thing I wanted to bring up with what you were saying there is there seems to be this stark difference in mindset between this kind of forcing it at all costs and trying to desperately to make it work, and then when and you said how you just kind of sit back sometimes and like trust in the universe almost, and trust in yourself kind of thing, without being too worried about it. But I feel like that's a much more, it's this kind of more, I'm going to go with the river rather than trying to sort of swim upstream against it, and go with what, you know, like what the talents I was given, and trust that will work out better, rather than it has to be a certain way and it has to be this, it has to be that. It sounds to me like you've just always had that deeper trust that it would work out when you were doing things that you.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's definitely been times of sort of mild panic, and like, you know, this sort of, because that, honestly, like that, you know, I was educated a certain way, like we talked about at the beginning, like, you know, that university thing, and stepping out of it, I knew it was the right thing to do, but it doesn't stop, like, you know, hangovers of lives past coming up. And, you know, there were times, because, you know, as I said, the beginning of the career was, you know, showing up to events and like, here's a hotel key, here's like a free drinks wristband. You're not making any money, but have a great weekend.
Yeah.
You know, wicked, and you know you're doing a good job. And there's a point there where you're like, well, I'm not paying any bills doing this kind of stuff. Or you go and do like a few days work, you get 100 quid. And, you know, it was,
and that's where those voices start to come in again, right?
Exactly, the voices that were coming in, but you know, I think I was, you know, I think I was quite good. I'm quite good at, like, maybe, you know, I was totally happy snowboarding and working and continuing to snowboard, and I made my life for myself in the Alps, and the emceeing thing came afterwards. And I was like, well, I think I was quite good at, I wasn't that afraid to fail, if that makes sense. Like, I was like, well, why not give it a go? Because if ever, you know, I'm having a pretty good time anyway.
Yeah.
If it all goes to shit, I'll just keep doing this, and then I'll figure something else out. And it seems like it was a pretty fun ride in the beginning. So I was like, well, why not? Like, yeah,
there's that kind of stoic principle, which is like, get used to things being shit, or get used to having a bit of a shit lifestyle, so that you're just freed up to do what you want. Because even if it fails, it's like, well, it would have been pretty much the same anyway, and have like that kind of basic lifestyle. Whereas I think if you get too caught up in like having a nice car and having a really cool flat, and I need to spend this on week, then suddenly there's so much more to lose. And then when you do start having those voices and you're doing like this passion project, you're like, oh fucking hell, I need to get that car again. I need to get that paycheck coming in. So I think there is, like, I always say my advice to someone leaving uni, if they ever ask me, which they probably shouldn't, but yeah, I'd say like, don't get a high cost of living, like straight away. Like that's probably the worst thing that you can do, because it makes the barrier for failing that much higher. So yeah, I think there's something definitely in that. And it's that kind of coping with the uncertainty of it all. Like if you're used to it being a bit chaotic and a bit all over the place, you're not scared of then trying something and knowing that it might then be like that again, because it's like, well, I've handled it before. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's actually been skills that I've fallen back on a little bit during these, Corona times, because, an event MC who's not had a proper, I mean, I've been lucky that Red Bull have managed to hook me up with some stuff through the Corona times. But, I went from, a completely back-to-back booked summer with events in the States, in the UK, all over Europe, potential gigs in Australia, like, a massively full calendar, to, well, you've got nothing there. And, I have been stupid with my money. So I did, was able to fall back on some savings and things like that. But, it was actually quite nice almost to revert to a little bit of, oh, I used to eat beans and rice or pasta and ketchup. Like, if I've got an onion to go with it, I'm winning. So it's a little bit of a reset on that, which was quite nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the thing is, it's quite easy to get above your means, and like you said, that whole safety net of everything around you, and in order to step out of that can be terrifying. And people are looking for that kind of advice. It's like, if you're scared, don't worry. Like it's a scary thing, even this whole stepping away from the norm. I mean, one of my best friends from school, sorry, my legs are crossed and I can't feel my foot. One of my best friends from school, we had, very similar. We were both actually scholars at school, ironically. We're in the Latin class together. We had a band together. And, sort of touted, he studied a little bit harder for his A-levels, but, touted as well as academically, he was very bright and was touted as, going off to uni and being whatever he wanted. And he was one of the only guys who didn't go to university as well. And he's a recording artist now, and he's pursued his musical career. And we often chat about it when we do meet up, fairly infrequently these days. But, he had a very similar situation with people saying, oh, like, you sure that's what you want to do? You got places that, you could be going to Cambridge, mate, and all this kind of things. And he's like, no, music's my thing. I'm going to do this, and, the ups and downs of it. And, he's got albums out, and the BBC commissioned him now to do a song about, it's called No Human Is an Island, about lockdown and things like this. And he's done really well. But, there were times
even
where,
someone like that, who it seems like it was always easily his path. Like it's
exactly like he
like
sacked it off. Times of, I'd call him up like, oh, I'm in London, are you around for a beer? And he's like, no, I'm unloading houses all week. I mean, what do you mean? He's like, that was his job. He was like, he's working as a removal guy in order to keep the
you don't see those ugly hours, those really shit hours. And I think that's when it comes back to, you have to have some sort of inner confidence or belief that there is an end goal that you're working towards, because otherwise you just wouldn't do those shit hours, and you just, you do something else. But just to kind of round off this main part of the bout, been great fun dancing around the ring. But so just going into that, actually finding the MC, because obviously that was probably your moment, like watershed moment, if you like, where you thought, hang on, like, I can actually make a career out of this. This is and you probably had that amazing feeling. You were like, hang on, I've just done something drunk that I probably do anyway, and I can probably make a career out of this and make money from it, and it's probably only a couple of days of work a week. So I think that's a really like cool thing to be able to have done, and that it sort of shows that whole trusting process that you went through kind of ended up rewarding you by that, like, you kept just being yourself, being true to yourself, and doing the things that you wanted to do. And then ultimately an opportunity came up where you're like, okay, I can now make this work financially. So I just wanted to kind of ask your thoughts on that, and this conversation between finding your passion, or does your passion sort of find you if you're just being yourself and it naturally happens?
Well, I mean, I think, it came, my career as it is has come, it came from my passion for snowboarding. So, you know, I found snowboarding and I knew that I was in, like, I almost sacrifice anything to, I mean, you could say that because, you know, the times when we do stuff that, you know, I have friends who've died in avalanches, or, you know, friends who can't use their legs or have, you know, serious accidents. So there is like an element of all in for snowboarding itself. And I think if you are genuinely passionate about something, like, that's not to say, you know, there's millions of people, billions of people are passionate about cricket or football. And it's not to say necessarily that just because you like cricket or football, you're going to be able to work in cricket or football, but it's more like being able to somehow keep that passion alive. And if an opportunity presents itself, or see an opportunity and being able to exploit it, which, you know, to bring it back to the luck thing that we were talking about earlier, I was lucky enough, like that opportunity presented itself where I happened to be there when someone handed me a microphone. And it was actually for a few years, I did refer to myself as really lucky. I did say that. Like I took the phrase that someone was saying to me. I was like, no, I was just lucky. I was just lucky. Yeah. And it was my cousin who said to me one day, he's like, well, hold on a second. Like, luck is only when opportunity meets preparation. And he's like, it might not be you know, your classic preparation, like studying books to become a lawyer, which is great. If you want to be a lawyer, you study your books, you've got the knowledge, and then when you get a job interview, you go and you nail it, and you get hired by a big firm. And that's that traditional method. But for me, my preparation was all my passion for snowboarding, reading hundreds and thousands
15 years worth.
Exactly. Like going snowboarding, like being so into it that I'd sit and read the same magazine 10 times, learn everything I could about it. And in a way, that was my education. And then, you know, when the opportunity presented itself, which happened to be when I was still shit-faced from the Schlussalarm, and I was given a microphone, the preparation that I had, I was able to grasp that opportunity. So it was cool. It was when my cousin said that to me, I was like, oh, and I still refer to myself as lucky because you know, there is an element of luck, but that whole
and it's a grounded English thing to say, right?
Well, I think it is. It's that inherent Britishness. Oh no, it was nothing to do with me. If we were talking American style, I'd be like, God damn it, I made this thing. Like, before me, there was no voice of snowboarding, man. I am snowboarding, like that kind of shit. But in fact, I know a couple of snowboard MCs who are a little bit like that. They're good friends of mine.
I bet.
Oh, there's a notification. But yeah, so I think that kind of, my preparation wasn't an orthodox one. Oh.
Yeah, no, it's
it wasn't an orthodox. It was all coming towards where it's led me now, you know, and luckily, thankfully, thankfully, I ran with it, you know, because it, you know, I had a pretty good job building the fun parks, and I enjoyed it, and you know, my boss was cool enough to say like that. I think for us, UMCing is a cool thing for our park because we'll get more recognition anyway. So you will work out your schedule so that you can go and do this. And you know, being able to sort of pick up the ball and run with it, as it were, was probably the best thing that I ever did. And I think that's the point, really, in a lot of ways. Is there's times when people probably could do something like that, but maybe some of the pressures that we were talking about, you know, financial or whatever, are what keeps them locked in a one track, maybe.
Yeah. And did that change the mindset for you when your cousin said that to you about, you know, no, fuck that, you're not lucky. It's you've worked hard for this. Did that change your mindset from being the lucky guy doing it to like owning that role and being a proper pro?
I think it did. I think there was a bit of, I think there wasn't. I mean, anyone who's seen me on the microphone will probably not say that lack of confidence is anything there, but I think there was a little element of what's the imposter syndrome? Is that the one where you kind of like, there was this sort of slight element of that, let's say, because you know, I'm up there. I was up there, like maybe talking about the best snowboarders in the world, and I was never anywhere near as good as them. I can snowboard wrong, and I can do cool stuff, but I never had the talent to get to that level, or the balls maybe. But so maybe there was a little bit of that kind of like, oh yeah, mate, why am I on the mic? But especially after my cousin said that, that kind of disappeared. I was like, no, I know what I'm doing. I know that people like this. Like, let's just go with it. And I think that helped as well when other things popped up. So obviously, I've had the opportunity to work, you know, outside of snowboarding, which has been great. And that's how we got in contact through word of mouth and things like that. And, you know, that comment from my cousin gave me the confidence to go into stuff that I maybe had no idea about and just run with it and just go, you know what, you're just going to have to do a bit of homework, but you've got this. So like with Danny and the Drop and Roll tour, a friend of mine.
Don't call them BMXs.
Yeah, don't call them BMXs, exactly. Well, the first time I worked with those, you know, Danny's the most famous mountain biker on the planet. Yeah. And I get a call, and a friend of mine was emceeing for them, and we'd sort of worked together a little bit in snowboarding and been friends and snowboarded together for years. And he got off kind of down the biking route, and he called me up and he's like, look, I can't make this show. Would you mind covering for me? And we'd always sort of backed each other up. It was James Thorne, who he now lives in Australia. But he was kind enough to call me up and say, look, they need an MC. Can you do it? And I was like, I mean, I had a little moment of like, I don't know if I can. I don't know much about, I mean, I know who Danny is, but like, they're like, you know, the bike scene's quite hardcore and you don't want to mess stuff up. But it was, the words of my cousin, like, come on, that kind of, like, you got to seize the opportunity. So yeah, then off I went to MC this bike show with Danny and the guys. And yeah, did a little bit of homework. I was pretty good when I showed up. I was like, look guys, just run me through a little bit of what's going on. I'm going to be straight up. Crowd control, no worries, I've got that. But let's work a bit on the technical thing. And thankfully, it gave me the confidence to run with it. And you know, I've been working with those guys ever since. So.
Yeah, awesome. There's a few things that I'd like to ask about the actual technical side of. The thing that I was going to bring up was how I think it's really, I was actually had written down to ask you, and you brought it up yourself around that whole, there's that preparation of like getting your actual qualifications and writing, you know, getting exams to allow you to be a good MC. But I mean, MC doesn't probably lend itself to that kind of preparation anyway. But yeah, it's cool that you'd taken kind of a different kind of preparation to have that moment. But yeah, is there anything in your mind that makes someone a good MC? I was just going to say, like, is there anything that makes someone a good MC? Like, what's the most important thing? Is it just the passion and knowledge and that natural ability, or?
I think there's sort of different levels. There's good MCs and there's great MCs, I guess you could say. Like, and it also, the thing is with what I do is you've got to be able to tune your skills for that day. So what I do at a live event for a crowd is very different for what I would do for the BBC, for example, for a TV show. Mm-hmm. So sort of being able to adapt to what's going on. So a lot of the times, and as well, reading the crowd, like sometimes you're at an event and you're like, oh, this crowd's wild, we can play with that. But I think for me, it's hard to nail down. I think if you're emceeing at a sporting event, the base skill that you should have is at least engagement with the sport and knowledge of the sport. So I'm not the most knowledgeable about some of the sports or the events that I work at. I then will do some preparation, but I'm able to quite well pick up on the atmosphere and what's going on. So I think one of the worst things an MC can do is pretend that you know what you're talking about when you don't. Yeah. So either do your homework, which I have been guilty of not doing occasionally, or like make sure you're in a situation where you're able to sort of kind of admit that you don't really know what's going on. It doesn't sound great like that, but be able to work it so that you're kind of playing with the crowd like that. But yeah, so for live events, I'd say crowd engagement is massive. Being able to entertain to a point, but also to be able to function in the background as well. Like, you don't want to steal the show from what's really going on. Yeah, which I'm guilty of sometimes. I think back in the day, I could get quite excited that you're all here to see me.
Yeah. That imposter syndrome one must be the biggest one that does hold people, because I've done a tiny bit of, emceeing when I've literally just, as I've been running a golf event and there's been 50 people there, and it's like, oh my God, there's a microphone and we need to say like who's doing the shootout. And I'm like, well, it's going to have to be me, isn't it? And I think the only thing that's allowed me to be even, 10% okay at it is just because I'm the founder of the thing, and people know I'm a founder. So it kind of, at least I'm probably the one that should be doing it. So there's a little bit less of that imposter syndrome. But I think emceeing must be the worst possible thing when you're suddenly forced into that situation. No one respects you. No one they're like, who's this guy? And then you can very quickly be turned on and be like, oh my God, this guy's a complete twat. Because it's one against thousands, and it's not that hard for them to turn on you. Have you ever had a moment where like you've slightly lost the crowd and they go like, who's this wanker? Why is he?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the I've always been quite good at turning it around, let's say. But yeah, there's definitely people who don't like what I do. I'm not gonna lie. Like I've been at after event parties where a friend of mine specifically, he's like, oh, Henry, come and meet this guy. I'm like, all right. And he's like, hey, this is my friend Timo or something. We're up in Finland. He's like, this guy hates your emceeing. And he just sort of left me and this guy awkwardly holding beers. And I'm like, yeah, cheers for that. Thanks. See you later. And I've had it in America where some competitors thought that my emceeing had influenced the judges negatively, right. Which was an interesting conversation. It was a funny old one, but there's been a few times where I think at that point I tend to try and just fall back on basic. If I feel like the crowd's like, okay, they're not that into what I'm doing, I'll just kind of fall back on like being a PA. I'll just fall back on relaying information. And because the bare minimum of what you have to do is relay the information of what's going on, and that's it. So as long as you do that, you're fine. And anything else is a bonus. So if there's a point where I'm like, oh, they're not into this, I'll just sort of tone it down and just go back to stats, information, and keep going. And essentially, that you can get away with that. If you do that properly, you're a good MC. And anything else, if you're able to entertain, or if you're able to like make it exciting or anything on top, that's a bonus. And because that's one thing that does annoy me is watching events and let's say the MC they get things wrong. And of course we're all human and things can go wrong. And I've made mistakes 100%. You're on the end of a 7-day event and you're standing on a mountain and you're exhausted, and you do make mistakes, but I just feel like sometimes there's a misrepresentation of the sport because people just get hired because of who they are rather than exactly what they do. And that annoys me. And that's what I have in the back of my head if I go into another sport and I'm like, I've got to get this right, because I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who someone's leaning on a fence going, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Or that was the wrong trick. Like, what are you doing?
Awesome. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I could go on for another hour easily and just chat about all these kinds of things. But I'm just going to slowly sort of start to wrap up, shift around the ring a little bit. And just the last point is just around, you mentioned other sports. Is there anything in future that you really want to, do more of? Have you got any things in the pipeline, like
curling, mate?
Curling.
I'd love to do it. Now, in the pipeline, this another run at the Olympics would be good. At the Winter Olympics would be great. I would have loved to have somehow got on the ballot for the Summer Olympics, but that's sort of a little bit up in the air at the moment. What's going on there?
Yeah. It would just be one part.
One part is the dream. That's it. Yeah.
Because hearing you talk about, you're not sure even if the trial bikes you had enough knowledge in. Well, we have enough knowledge in golf. But then again, the way I see that is that there's with what we're trying to do with one part is we want to get a new audience in, watching golf. So in a way, you can almost sometimes be, if you're trying to make an event really accessible to non-purists and traditionalists of the sport, you actually sometimes potentially want an MC who can relate more to the non-fan and like sort of take the piss out of all the tradition and and the boring stuff and the geeky polos that people are wearing. So
yeah, I mean, well, golf.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's something that it's something that within snowboarding sometimes I've come across is this kind of the bridge between the sort of core endemic audience and the wider public, and being able to bridge that gap of sort of
Got it.
Not going too far down the rabbit hole of technical terms and jargon. And it's something that I'm guilty of snowboarding, because it's going to sound a bit hard. Like I feel like in some ways when you pander to the people who don't know what's going on, you alienate your real fans, who are the ones who love it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had producers who I worked with who they were great, and I understood what they were trying to do. But we'd be at like some really core snowboard event. They're like, right, we need you to like explain what a 360 is. And I'm like, if you don't know what a 360 is, you're probably not going to be interested in this event. And they were like, oh, but we need more people. I'm like, look, this is not the event for that. And I was always like, look, do you ever hear, I mean, David Gower, Michael Atherton sitting down and explaining what 4 runs is? No, they talk about cricket, and if you don't know, you either get told or you learn. And of course, cricket has a much wider audience.
Yeah, and I guess in maybe one of these, I don't know if you've heard of the 100, but you know, at that kind of tournament, maybe there'd be a bit more explanation. So it kind of depends on the vibe and the whole experience. But yeah, anyway, I mean,
being able to bridge that gap is an interesting thing, and it is quite. That's why I do enjoy emceeing quite a lot in pairs, because what they'll try and do often is they'll have an anchor who is, let's say, that kind of bridge between the public and the core, and then you'll have the expert, and they'll sort of, a good emceeing pair will know exactly how to play off each other for that.
So that's it. At one part, it'll be you and Peter Alice. That'll be the dynamic duo.
Perfect. I have to dust off my clubs. It's been a long time since I played golf, but I did play when I was young. So yeah.
Now, well, anyone who doesn't know what a 360 is clearly hasn't played enough Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which, you know, everyone should have played. But yeah, right. Moving into the final round, I've just got a few quick fire questions that I always ask people at the end of the bout. So straight off the bat, what's something that you used to believe in that you now no longer believe in? You can take that any way you want.
Used to believe in, but now I don't believe in.
Yeah.
I used to believe. Fuck. Like there's loads of different things, but like I'm trying to relate them to the podcast. I could probably do it the other way around better. Like what I didn't believe in, and now I do.
Go for it.
I didn't believe in hangovers, but I definitely do now.
like it. Especially before emceeing.
Yeah.
Let's leave it at that one. And the second one is what does the word success mean to you now?
Oh. Now that's changed. I'd say back in the day, success I would say would be like, you know, kind of people knowing who you are in that field and stuff. But now success, I think, is just, for me, success is knowing in myself that I've done a good job, and whatever comes from it. If I've done whatever I'm meant to be doing and I've done it well, I can, and for me, like, I'm proud of what I did, then I can step back and I'm confident. If other people don't like it, I'm confident enough in myself now to be like, well, that's okay. Yeah. Like back in the day, it was like everybody has to like what I'm doing. Yeah, now I'm kind of a lot more. I think I did a good job, and if you didn't like it, I'm sorry. That's fine. Like,
again, it's that internal validation rather than the external.
Yeah. I mean, I have to be quite careful that it's not me like, well, what I did is perfect.
Yeah, no, I know.
Like,
yeah.
It's more like I'm
still being open to feedback and criticism, exactly. but knowing that you did your best. Yeah, I just read this really small thing about confidence somewhere the other day, and it was like you can either choose to do your best or like or try and just like blindly back your ability at something. And I think it's kind of related to that, because it's like,
I think
if you're constantly just trying to do your best and you know that you've done the best of your ability, then you can't really get too angry at yourself or care that you've had someone that's told you that shit or whatever, because that's all that you can control.
No, I think earlier on in my career as well, when I realized I was actually okay at this, I think I had a bit more of that, of like, I was much worse at taking feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I suspect that was lack of confidence, actually.
Yeah.
Whereas it came off maybe as overconfidence, but it's probably just overcompensating for like this idea that like you could be flawed. And now I'm more comfortable in my skin to be able to sit back and take feedback and say, okay, cool. I can, let's do it like that.
Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. And then whenever someone comes in the unboxing ring, unlike boxing, when a song plays you in to hype you up, you get a song to play you out after you've dropped the mic. So what would that be for you, and why?
Whoa. Oh. There's 3 or 4, but
yeah.
Oh. I'm gonna have to go with Journey. No. I've got a complete blank. What's it called? Since You've Been Gone, Rainbow.
Okay. Awesome.
So it could have been Journey, Don't Stop Believing. But so Since You've Been Gone, Rainbow is just a song that I remember. I've got a rock anthem CD when I was a kid. And like I used to play it back to back. And it was one of the songs that I remembered the lyrics for. And we were at an event in Tokyo, a Burton Snowboards event. And it was actually one of these really core events that they were trying to make more mainstream, but it was kind of street rail snowboarding, which is like as far down the snowboarding rabbit hole as you go. Like it's not relatable to anyone in the mainstream whatsoever. It's just like only snowboarders would get it. And half snowboarding is like that stupid. Like the people who are into it, they love it. And we ended up in some bar in Tokyo, and it was a rock and roll bar where there's a huge stage, and there's instruments everywhere, but you don't see the band, and you're getting your beers. And all of a sudden some alarm goes off and they just stop pouring your pints. And the bar staff are all a family, and they've all like got full metal kits, and they get on stage and just start playing whatever songs they want.
Yeah.
Or you want. And somehow I was hammered, and it's a theme through this podcast. Someone convinced me that I should sing a song, and I sung that, and it went down a treat. And it's always been one of those songs that I play when anyone wants it.
Karaoke song. Love it.
Karaoke song. Yeah, it's always a good one.
There are 2 good karaoke songs there that you mentioned, but
yeah, because Journey's another one that there's a good group of snowboard friends who we always play that whenever we're a few pints in and things like that.
I bet. Henry, thanks very much for your time, and very much enjoyed the spar with you. And I hope we do one day do that event or work together in future.